And I also want to take a moment to wish Happy Hanukkah to everyone starting this Tuesday. And that will be a wonderful celebration of light. And we are all celebrating the light in the midst of the darkness. So many holidays celebrating light in the midst of the darkness since time immemorial. So we're talking today, continuing our talk about our theme for the month, which is integrity. It's our value. We've been living our values, and the value that we're talking about this month is integrity. And our theme is the high watch of oneness. And what it says at the Centers for Spiritual Living, they say, we embrace the quality of being honest and strive to let our inner convictions match our outer actions. We express wholeness, honesty, and fairness in our relationships and our activities. The book that we're working with this month is a book by a Methodist minister, actually. If you know who you are, you will know what to do. If you know who you are, you will know what to do. So, integrity means wholeness. It comes from the Latin word integer, which we think of as being numbers, but it's about a whole number. And so it's about wholeness, being integrated, being complete. So it's where my beliefs, my convictions, my thoughts, and my behaviors are integrated into my life. So I'm really living what I believe. And from those beliefs come my thoughts, and from those thoughts come my decisions. From those decisions come my living a life of integrity, a life of character. So last week we talked about wandering off the path, and one of the things I didn't get to was, and I wanted to talk about, were 3 detours to our integrity. And this is our personal integrity. He says the first is our self-esteem. To live with integrity is to have a self-identity that is accurate and a self-esteem that is positive and confident. Now what happens is a lot of us in childhood, in our families, had wounds. And he talks about a little girl who needs braces, at some point, but she's a little girl, she's expressing joy, she's laughing, and her father says, "You have the ugliest smile." Well, what do you think that did? Do you think it made her want to smile? I mean, do you think that was a big damp blanket over her joy? Absolutely. And then I had an experience, and he talks about a little boy who had an experience where he comes home and he's got, 5 A's and 1 B. And his mother looks at it and says, "You need to do better in math." So, there's not, an acknowledgement of, "Whoa, you got 5 A's, woo, doing great." No, that 1 B, get it up there. So we get wounds to our self-esteem and wounds to who we think we are. They did a poll with world-class athletes. And the poll asked this question. You are offered You are offered a banned substance that comes with 2 guarantees. You will not be caught, and you will win every competition you enter for the next 5 years, and then you will die from the side effects of the substance. Would you take it? Over half of the athletes said yes. Over half of the athletes said yes. Because their esteem comes from winning competitions. Their esteem comes from outside, not inside. And that is a pretty scary thought, that you'd be willing to give up, your life for 5 years of awards from other people. Do you think that your trophy is the first thing you grab when the fire hits your house? Probably not. The second detour to this life of integrity is narcissism. For narcissists, their favorite topic is themselves. They experience grandiosity, that is, an exaggerated sense of self-importance and specialness. As they say, he's a legend in his own mind. And my grandfather used to say, there's no one living but himself. They have entitlement. Since they're special people, they don't have to live by the same rules as everyone else. And it usually is a defense against insecurity. And in that defense of insecurity, they lose track of their soul. And in that, loving relationships are virtually impossible because they always have to be number one. All of their needs have to be met all the time. So there's no kind of relationship really possible. And we have all had moments of our own little narcissism. When we were children, everything was about us, and because that's a matter of survival in some cases. We have to do what is necessary for us to survive. And so it's all about whatever we need to do to get through. But we're expected to mature out of that at some point. And the other thing that is a detour on the road to integrity is drifting. We listen to voices that aren't for us or follow directions that aren't ours. We're in need of reconnecting. I saw the little movie Lady Bird yesterday. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a wonderful film, and it's very authentic. That's the wonderful thing about it. And it's filmed in Sacramento. It's really sort of a love note to Sacramento. And but this young girl has a best friend, and at one point she sort of abandons that best friend because she's got a crush on this guy, and he runs with a whole different circle of the wealthy kids in this private Catholic school. And so she starts pretending that she's wealthy. She tells them that she lives in a house that is not hers. And then she lets her integrity go in order to get together with this young man. And she befriends this other woman, or this other young girl, rather than her best friend. But at one point, she's going to go to the prom, and she gets into the car with the guy, and the other couple, the other pseudo-best friend, is in the backseat with her boyfriend. And he didn't even come into the house. This is her senior prom. He didn't come into the house. He beeped. And so she went out. She gets in the car, and he says, I don't feel like going to the prom. Let's go to Mike's. And the people in the back seat say yes. And then she says, okay. And then they're driving along, and then all of a sudden, it's sort of like with the prodigal son. She comes to herself. She comes to herself. And she says, I really want to go to the prom. She says, take me over to my friend's house. So she goes over to her friend's house, and her friend is sitting there all depressed in her bathrobe. So she goes up there, and they raid the refrigerator, and they snack on some stuff because they always like to overindulge together. And then she says, let's go to the prom. And she says, do you have a dress? And she said, I've had a dress for 6 months. So she goes in, she puts on her dress, they go to the prom together. They're dancing together, they get their picture together, they have a great time. Because she found her integrity. Her integrity was, I want to be with the people I love at this moment in time that I really want to celebrate. And I want to dance, and I want to have a good time. And I know if I go with my best friend, we will dance and have a good time. And they did. So it's about coming to ourselves. Because, Ernest Holmes says and this is the Ernest Holmes, being the founder of the Science of Mind and Spirit, says, if God created you after his own nature, and there is nothing else he could have made you out of, then the thing you are after is already here within you. The only things that stand between you and it are the accumulated thoughts, beliefs, and emotions of the ages. But there is nothing there that has not been put there by yourself or by the human race. What has been put there can be removed. These unbeliefs are thought patterns laid down throughout the ages and accentuated by your own experience, by your inherited tendencies and environment. All of the world's religions talk about virtues and values. So let's move into moral integrity, and that is the integrity that we practice in society, not just personally, but in society. And the word character came from a Greek word meaning an engraved mark, which was a symbol or imprint on the soul. And in the 17th century, it came to mean the sum of qualities that define a person. Their intellect, their thoughts, their ideas, motives, intentions, temperament, judgment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of those things that make us who we are. So the Oxford Dictionary defines this moral integrity as soundness of moral principle, the character of uncorrupted virtue, especially in relation to truth and fair dealing, uprightness, honesty, sincerity. And Webster's dictionary adds, avoiding deception, expediency, artificiality, and shallowness. So truth, fair dealing, uprightness. These qualities of moral integrity are things that have been discussed by philosophers, theologians, ethicists from the beginning of time. Long before Christ, they were talking about these things. But most of the world's religions have as their values, their core values, bless you, compassion, truthfulness, humility, kindness, justice, tolerance, and avoiding harm. Avoiding harm. The values we decide to accept as our own, having integrity for us, become the foundation of principles by which we live. So principles frame our judgments, which guide our decisions that result in our actions. So principles frame the judgments that guide our decisions that result in our actions. Where do we get these values? Well, we start getting them in our family. That's the first place. And the reason we get these values is we find out what it is that makes us a good girl or boy or a bad girl or boy. We find out where we get rewarded and where we get punished, right? So that's where we start getting these values. Now, we not only get them from what we're taught, we get them from what we're watching, what we're seeing. Anybody ever heard that, don't do as I say, don't do as I do as I say? I think many of us have heard that. You know, don't smoke, they said as they were taking a puff. You know, it was like, okay, thank you very much. So what we do is we decide what has value for us. And so the first thing we do, maybe when they're told don't smoke and your parents are smoking, I don't know about you, but I went up into the hills and we had cigarettes that we'd stolen from our parents, and we all sat around on branches of trees smoking cigarettes. It was like, because that's what grown-ups did. And we also had like candy cigarettes and chocolate cigarettes. I mean, we were being trained towards these cigarettes. The second, he says, and of course, as being a Christian minister, he says the second moral starting point is our faith. So a lot of us were raised in particular religions at one time or another, and so we got some values from that experience. Now, some of the values we accepted, and some of the values we didn't accept. At least for myself, I will say I didn't accept that women couldn't be priests. You know, in the Catholic Church, there is a total glass ceiling you cannot go past. You cannot become a priest, except for those people who have broken away and they now have women priests. And of course, the Episcopal Church has had women priests for a long time. So, you know, that was a value I did not accept. I did not accept that letter from Paul that said, a woman shall not preach to a man. Obviously. And it turns out, later studies have shown, Paul didn't really write that letter. That was written after he was dead. So, interesting. But, you know, the values of love and compassion, forgiveness, hope, reconciliation, humility, we try these on. We see how we can live them. In the Christian church, they have 7 values. The church came up with 7 values: faith, hope, love, courage or fortitude, justice, prudence, and temperance. Now the thing is, we can't go around imposing our beliefs on others. That was a big flaw in the whole missionary adventures around the world, where we imposed our beliefs on everyone if we were, you know, Christian missionaries, and definitely devalued the values of others. So when we discover and claim the values that are the basis of how we live our lives, that's where we really get in touch with the principles that are the foundation of all of our actions and decisions. There's a Parker Palmer quote. Parker Palmer was a wonderful Quaker. I've talked about him before. He says, before you tell your life what truths and values you've decided to live up to, let your life tell you what truths you embody, what values you represent. So we need to look at our lives right now and say, well, what do my actions say about my values? Because that's where the rubber meets the road. Where do my values show up in how I live? There's a man named Lawrence Kohlberg who has a model for moral development. He says, the first level is you do the right thing because it's good for you. You avoid punishment and you get rewarded. That's the first level. Second one, you uphold the rules and conventions of society or authority just because they are the society's rules, expectations, or conventions. You do it because it's expected of you. It's how the society that you're in works, and so you do that just because you're supposed to. The highest level is you understand not only society's rules, but the values and principles behind them. We would say the spirit of them. At this point, you choose not out of blind adherence or self-interest, but out of reflective, thoughtful conviction, believing in the principles that make it right. As Dumbledore said to Harry Potter, it's our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities. It is our choices that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities. So, the thing about this is, it ain't easy. It is not easy to live a life of integrity. You say you have a value. Honesty is the value. But then the time comes when your daughter is in a school district that is substandard. And then you don't have money for private school. So you remember that your parents live in a district that has a really good school district. So are you going to lie to the authorities and say that your daughter lives there so she can go to that school? So that has to do with prioritizing our values. What is the most important value? I'm not telling you the answer. I'm just saying these questions are not easy. These questions are not easy. And the thing about this integrity is that it's the thing we do when no one's watching. The thing we do because it's who we are. He tells a story, and this is for Tom Devine. I know he's a golfer. It says, Bobby Jones would define himself as a golfer when he won the Grand Slam of golf. He defined himself as a person to most of the public at the 1925 U.S. Open. He was playing the 11th hole at Worcester Country Club outside of Boston. Before his pitch to the green, Jones believed he had inadvertently caused the ball to move ever so slightly, a violation of the rules. He turned to one of the marshals and called the penalty on himself. Discussion then followed among the officials. Neither of the marshals nor his playing partner, Walter Hagen, had seen the ball move. Hagen tried to dissuade him from pressing the point. When he finished his round, officials continued discouraging him from assessing the penalty. There was no changing his mind. He knew what he saw. His score was a 77, not a 76. The violation was a one-stroke penalty, and with that stroke, he would have won the U.S. Open. But he didn't, because he followed the rules. As impressive as the integrity of that decision, his comment to a friend after the tournament was equally striking. He was being appropriately praised for the character and sportsmanship he had shown. Jones seemed surprised and even indignant at the attention he was getting for simply following the rules. He said, "You'd as well praise me for not breaking into banks." So, what do we want to do about our values now? And not only our values, but the virtues. The virtues are a little different from the values. When we have a value, a virtue is personal. They're qualities of character and moral excellence within us. An attitude is a value, an attribute is a virtue. So by that I mean, if we admire courage, courage is one of our values. If we're courageous, then courage is one of our virtues. So it becomes a virtue when we practice the value. When we practice the value, we become what we've said we believe. And that is our challenge. And that is our role, because the thing is, we are innately good, loving, honest, compassionate people. We were born that way, and some things happened in our life that may have gotten us off track. So this is really not about getting something that isn't there. It's about letting go of the stuff that's in the way And that's what we do. We let go of the stuff in the way so that we can be those divine emanations of the one that we are. So we can be those good, loving, joyful, compassionate, creative, abundant people that we are. And so, our affirmation for today is, I commit to a life of depth and meaning. I commit to a life of depth and meaning. I commit to a life of depth and meaning. I commit to a life of depth and meaning. And we are now saying our covenant. We got our covenant up there. And this is to get our consciousness lined up to call in our new minister. So, we say together, God has promised, so powerful is the light of unity that it can illuminate the whole earth. My purpose, my new minister is the unity that I am. I see my new minister empowering our thriving spiritual community. The universal intentions for our new minister are to inspire me to live in unity as an expression of love, to awaken me to the wisdom within, to embody the consciousness of wholeness in community and organizational well-being. The community intentions for my new minister are to offer mystical teachings that illuminate the science of mind principles, to be a loving and beneficial presence in the greater community in support of social activism. And so it is.